Antarctica and other frozen continents have repeatedly been the source of major scientific breakthroughs. These regions frost so quickly that plants and animals used to live in these areas are fully preserved within just a few hours. This allows us to take a closer look at Earth's mysterious past by collecting the remains of these creatures, which essentially act as time capsules of a world we once knew. Let's take a look at 10 of the craziest discoveries that were found frozen in ice. Stay tuned for number 1 to see one of the most unbelievable findings to date. Number 10. Some of the objects that have been found frozen in ice are not necessarily from a different time. While this entry isn't considered to be a piece of lost history, it certainly proves just how difficult icy terrains can make in everyday living. Back in 1952, a military plane left its base and headed for Anchorage. It had nearly reached its destination when the trip took a sudden turn and crashed into a nearby glacier. The crash claimed the lives of 52 people in total. But rescuers were unable to reach the site to determine if any of the occupants could be saved after impact. The conditions were so remarkably unsafe that rescue personnel were forced to abandon the mission and wait for a later day to attempt to retrieve the plane and its deceased occupants. However, the mission wasn't just delayed for a matter of weeks or months, but rather for 50 years. The glacier that the plane landed on was so unsafe that the crew was forced to wait for the glacier to naturally melt, meaning that the plane was not reached until sometime around 2002. Number 9. We likely don't think about how many of the animals we take for granted were forced to fight to survive in harsh ice age conditions. For example, our household dogs and cats come from a long line of animals and predators that were forced to overcome many of the natural obstacles that come along with living in a sub-zero environment. This was also true for a puppy that was found that was determined to have lived during the Ice Age. The dog was found completely encased in mud and ice, but was shockingly well preserved. This good boy is estimated to have lived about 12,000 years ago, making it one of the oldest intact canines to ever be found. He was located in the Siberian tundra and has helped to revise many of our previous beliefs about canines who lived in icy conditions. Another interesting component of this discovery is that the puppy was found while searching for an entirely different Ice Age creature, the woolly mammoth. Number 8. Alligators are most often found in relatively warm climates. They love muddy, swampy terrain and rarely venture outside of these conditions. However, some warm climates are at risk of a sudden frost without notice. This revealed some rather shocking information to scientists many years ago. Alligators can be frozen alive, then spring back to life when the ice melts. However, they cannot live this way for any major length of time. Most alligators are only capable of surviving for a single winter, but that is still several months that these gators are encased in ice, essentially dead, then simply resume life as usual once the weather warms up. Scientists don't entirely understand what allows this behavior, but it is believed that their heartbeats slow down dramatically, only beating once every so often. This allows their blood to continue flowing to all of their vital organs without risking damage. This is a feature that has likely proven to be quite useful to alligators throughout history, which is likely why they are one of the oldest animals that have existed without dramatic physical appearance changes for thousands of years. Number 7. Many of us probably grew up believing that Antarctica is nothing more than a large piece of ice floating above sea level. While this belief is untrue, most of us were probably blissfully unaware that several lakes flow beneath Antarctica. Back in the 1970s, a group of researchers headed to the Antarctic after using radar systems that led them to believe the continent was home to over 400 individual lake systems that had been hiding under the ice. As it would turn out, they were correct. Researchers believe that these lakes formed when Antarctica split from other continents millions of years ago. They began drilling into the 3-kilometer thick ice and taking samples of the flowing water below. They found that the water was -3 degrees Celsius, yet it was not frozen. They learned that this was due to the immense amount of pressure that the ice placed on the water, which would not allow it to expand and freeze. Later on in the 1990s, a group of Russian scientists discovered that Lake Vostok, the third largest lake in the world, was below the surface of the continent. This was a major revelation in the scientific community. The discoveries didn't end there though. By 2014, scientists had discovered that there was a large ecosystem of plants that had been living beneath the Antarctic surface for millennia. It was theorized that these plants had not seen sunlight in millions of years and had managed to survive below the surface of the ice using methane and ammonium as fuel to grow. Number 6. One of the more startling discoveries that researchers have made in recent years was when they found loads of World War I artifacts buried beneath the ice in the Alps. History seems to have essentially forgotten that many of the battles that took place in World War I were fought from higher ground such as the icy mountains. This was known as being one of the worst ways to conduct a war, as many of the soldiers lost their lives to the frigid conditions rather than warfare. The bodies of many soldiers have been found fully preserved in the ice, alongside their weapons, clothing, and other items. It is incredibly eerie to think that there are bodies of former World War I veterans literally frozen in time at the peaks of the mountains. Number 5. The Otzi Man is an individual who has become quite popular recently, as he is known to be the most well-preserved body found in the Alps and is around 5,300 years old. His discovery was quite shocking because he was found to be an ancient ancestor of any individuals who currently live in Austria. Number 4. The woolly rhino is an extinct species of rhino that lived around 11,000 years ago, dying off at the same time as the woolly mammoth. Woolly rhinos have been found buried in ice, and cave paintings of them have been found all across Europe and Asia. It is believed that woolly rhinos suffered the same fate as woolly mammoths and were eventually hunted to death after humans found uses for the fur, horns, and bones. Number 3. The saber-toothed tiger is believed to have lived around 10,000 years ago, as did many other ancient Arctic animals. Scientists believe that they likely died off after global temperatures rose too high for them, and humans hunted off the only remaining specimens several thousand years ago. Most of these cats weighed nearly 1,000 pounds, making them one of the largest felines to ever roam the earth. Number 2. Several decades ago, researchers revealed that a large mountain range was discovered beneath the surface of the ice in the Antarctic. A mountain range known as the Gambhir Mountains was found to have been beneath 4,000 kilometers of ice, stretching over 1,200 kilometers and are expected to be about 1/3 the height of Mount Everest. The mountains were discovered back in 1958 by a group of Russian scientists, but little research has been conducted on them since then, as there is no safe way to reach their peaks. The mountains were found after the scientists were traveling across the country and noticed a dramatic thinning of ice and a change in gravitational pull. They began their investigation and found that the culprit was a large mountain range miles below the icy surface, buried underwater. The scientists were able to use radar and magnetic devices to illustrate the mountains and understand their physical features. It remains unclear how these mountains exist, because the heavy weight and flow of water and ice should have caused them to erode by now. However, they are still standing tall. This means that the mountains must have frozen and flooded extremely quickly to prevent them from decaying after all this time. It is assumed that there is a thick crust of ice that covers the mountaintops, preventing them from eroding and preserving their appearance for many years to come. Number 1. It is not uncommon to find a woolly mammoth that has been trapped in the ice for thousands of years. What's very uncommon, however, is to discover an almost fully preserved dinosaur. This creature is known as a nodosaur and was uncovered a few years ago, marking one of the most important dinosaur discoveries science has ever found. This discovery revealed loads of new information for scientists and even gave us a better idea of how these animals would have looked, since there was a large portion of the skin that was still intact. This dinosaur is estimated to have roamed the Earth around 110 million years ago, meaning that it was born sometime in the middle of the Cretaceous period. This was a time when many animal species were threatened and forced to adapt to avoid being hunted by predators to extinction. Scientists believe that this caused a major shift in the evolutionary timeline, such as with this dinosaur. Researchers claim that this dinosaur began to develop large spikes and tough skin to avoid being hunted by other animals. It also developed a large tail, readily equipped with a sharp mace at the end of it. So there you have it, 10 of the most amazing scientific discoveries that were found in ice. Did you find any of these discoveries surprising? How many of these were you already aware of? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more videos like this one.